Ladies and gentlemen, may I request all of you to please take your seats? Thank you. And request you to put your mobile phones on silent mode. Thank you again. On behalf of India Habitat Center and the Habitat Library and Resource Center, we welcome you all to the third book discussion in the ISC Conversations with Authors series. May I request Ms. Manvi Dhillion, business journalist with an extensive range of experience and who is the moderator of today's book discussion on Hamara Rahul, to take forward this evening's program. Over to you, Ms. Manvi Dhillion. Thank you so much.
So good evening. You know I'm Manvi Dhillion. I'm going to be your host this evening. Thank you for being here. We are gathered here today to celebrate Rahul Bajaj, Rahul Bhai to some of you. He was an entrepreneur, a patriot, a visionary, a straight talker, quite simply an extraordinary person whose contributions have been captured in a book, Hamara Rahul, which is essentially a book of tributes from a diverse set of luminaries. People who knew him in many different contexts, people who knew him in business, people who knew him in parliament, who knew him simply as a friend, who appreciated and knew him as a mentor, as a colleague, and as a philanthropist. In its essence, this is a book of stories about Rahul Bajaj by people who knew him best. Hamara Rahul, edited by Tarun and Kiran Pasricha, published by Juggernaut, has nearly 80 tributes, each of them revealing a very different side of Rahul Bajaj. Some achievements that all of us know very well, but many others that remind you of the gigantic canvas on which he operated. Most of all, this book, Hamara Rahul, tells you so much about the kind of person that he was. Not just a Goliath in the world of business or India's most effective ambassador, but very simply the kind of human being that Rahul Bajaj was. I'm going to quote very briefly from the book. It is specific details that ultimately help define and understand the way a great soul like him operated. Brutally frank, but always fair. A boxer in his school days who would openly throw straightforward punches at any system or establishment. A man with clarity of thought and conviction, but flamboyant in his thoughts. A man of robust common sense. His care and attention to little details and every person. He would respond to the person, not the label. He met friends without an agenda, perhaps the only big industrialist who lived at the factory site to maintain a constant connection with his employees. A man you would want next to you in good times and in bad. A man who lives in many parts and in many hearts. End of quotes. That Rahul Bajaj lives in many hearts, well, it's evident every time we gather to talk about him. It's evident at this gathering today, so thank you once again for being here to celebrate Rahul Bajaj and the tributes in the book Hamara Rahul. On June 10th this year, which is Rahul Bajaj's birthday, we had gathered in Mumbai for the book launch of Hamara Rahul with the entire Bajaj family, friends and colleagues. And I understand that some of them are joining us virtually today as well. Once again, a warm welcome, I've said that 3 times, to an evening dedicated to Hamara Rahul, a book edited by Tarun and Kiran Pasricha, published by Juggernaut. May I invite Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, President of the India Habitat Center, for her opening address.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. Today is not an ordinary evening because we are not discussing an ordinary individual. We are discussing Rahul Bajaj, whom I always described as an icon. And it must be curious for some of you to imagine that what would a professional foreign service officer like me have anything to do with Rahul Bajaj, particularly being a bong, who are notoriously terrible either at making money or keeping money or being on good terms with big business, right? That's the reputation Bengalis have. Fortunately, I'm from Delhi, so I'm a little better. I first met Rahul, and I never called him Rahul Bhai actually, because he told me that I'm not your brother, I'm your friend. I met him when I was Joint Secretary Europe West, and we had set up these eminent persons groups, and he was the moving spirit behind the Indo-German Consultative Group, and I was secretary of the group, having taken over from now Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, who was my predecessor as Joint Secretary Europe West. And when I first met him, I thought, wow, he's not at all like the way people describe him. I found him actually very modest and very quiet, and he wanted me to brief him about the meeting and what we are going to do, because we were going to Munich to meet the other side. The other side was actually driven by an extremely dynamic German publisher who in many ways was the German equivalent of Rahul. Very dynamic, very much on the go, etc. I realized very quickly that in many ways we were very similar, because we were both workaholics, we were both committed patriots, and we were both committed to putting India on the map at a very difficult time when we had gone nuclear and when we were under some kind of Western sanctions, and where the EU particularly, the Germans much less, would keep lecturing us on why don't you do labor reform, look at the Chinese, why don't you do this, why don't you do that. And it was Rahul who would explain to them that it's very easy to push through labor reform or anything else in a country where there is no parliament, no labor union, and nobody to answer to. But if you are in a democracy where everything you do is questioned, you have to do it the proper way. And perhaps that is the better way to do it, because that way the reforms stay and don't get reversed when the regime changes. I also realized very early in my association with him that he had a very kind heart, which manifested itself in his philanthropy, in the manner in which he interacted with people. And I'll give a very simple example before I conclude, and I'll come back when I get the chance. There was a CII event that I organized as ambassador to Netherlands, and I did it with my dear friend CB, a bong conspiracy, you could say. And I persuaded Rahul to come and to stay with me in Netherlands. And his wife called me and she said, he's going to be terrible because he's a very difficult guest, so I hope you won't regret it. I said, no, so far he's been as good as gold. He hasn't made any demands at all. And I introduced him to a very dear friend of mine, the late mayor of Amsterdam, Van der Laan, who was also very similar to him. And they hit it off amazingly. And we had this amazing, first the cruise on the canal, and then the dinner in the garden of the mayor of Amsterdam, and where we discussed how the Dutch can bring investment into India. And much later, the mayor got lung cancer, and it was not, he was not in good shape, and he called me. I had come back to India. And he said, I want to speak to Mr. Bajaj because I think he can give me the courage to face this challenge. So I rang him up immediately. And he was in the middle of something, and he said, just give me his mobile number. And after that, he used to call up Van der Laan almost on a daily basis to comfort him, to give him the courage, etc., etc., until Vanderland passed on. And Vanderland's wife spoke about Rahul in the funeral. It was very touching. I went for it. And she said that it took a Rahul Bajaj to give my husband the courage to face the inevitable. I have never forgotten that. So this evening is dedicated to an extraordinary man, to an icon who is no more, a person who is difficult to ever forget, and a person who it's impossible to think that he's passed on. But he has, but we will still honor his life and remember him for what he was. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for that, Ambassador Mukherjee. Over the next 35 minutes, we are going to take a deep dive into the life and work of Rahul Bajaj, and hopefully you're going to hear many more stories like the ones that Ambassador Mukherjee has shared. The three people that I'm going to invite in a moment, one you've already met, are people who knew Rahul Bajaj well in different ways, in different contexts, but who together can really bring the person he was to life. Ambassador Mukherjee, you have all met, President of the India Habitat Centre. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Rahul Bajaj was a mentor and guide to him and to CII. CB, thank you for coming here today. Please join us. A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director and former Editor of the Business Standard. AKB, thank you for being here today. Okay, housekeeping. We all have to put our mics on. I think to many people, and Mr. Bhattacharya as well, I've drawn that from the writing in the book, Rahul Bajaj was, and I'm going to use a few adjectives, but each of them hold true and define different parts of Rahul Bajaj. He was bold, he was fiercely independent in his thinking, and he had very sound business sense. When you think about that, they can appear to be slightly contradictory qualities to have, but he had them all in large measure. Mr. Bhattacharya, I know you've referred to that in your book, but what instances come to your mind when I throw those three defining adjectives about Rahul Bajaj to you?
Bold, fiercely.
Well, just bold, fiercely independent mind, and
business, sound business
sense.
Okay, thank you. I knew Mr. Bajaj. I always called him Mr. Bajaj whenever I met him, whether it was in Delhi or in Bombay or in Davos. Those days I used to go there almost every year, and Mr. Bajaj would be a regular attendant of that conference. So I will cite one instance where he was bold. This is the story of early 1970s when reforms were not even talked about even in drawing rooms. Bajaj scooter, Auto was exporting scooters to Latin America in a big way, and had made its mark felt, and this market share was rising rapidly. At that point in time, Piaggio, which was a partner of Bajaj, raised an objection and influenced the Brazilian government to impose levies on Bajaj auto scooters being exported to that market. And there was a kind of a Latin American conglomeration that happened, which meant that Bajaj Auto's exports ambitions took a hit. And at around the same time, Piaggio was having negotiations with Bajaj Auto how it can strengthen its relationships. And Mr. Bajaj realized that business relations with Piaggio is one thing, but the same partner trying to harm his overall business in the Latin American market is even worse. So he actually telling Piaggio that, listen, that's why he is fiercely independent as well, that I'm going to file a case against you in Brazil. And he fought, and there was a compensation that was awarded in Bajaj Auto's favor, and then truce was declared. So he was bold, he was fiercely independent, and he realized that if he is not protecting his market in Latin America, his overall exports will suffer. So he also had a very sound business sense. Now, I do not know of many industrialists in India who will have that combination of qualities. And when Piaggio decided to come to India independently, having been, realized that Bajaj is moving on its own, Mr. Bajaj fought a lonely battle to fight Piaggio's entry. In a sense, otherwise he was a very liberal, open person, but on the question of allowing Piaggio to come to India and have an tie up with the Lohia Machines Limited those days, everybody was wondering that what is this man doing? Here is this man who believes in capitalism, believes in free enterprise, competition. Now suddenly he is using his industrial lobbying power to stop somebody coming to India, which meant more choices. You don't have to wait for 25 years to get a scooter. Now, this question was asked to him, that why is it that you are stopping Piaggio's entry and setting up another plant, which will essentially mean that you don't have to book a scooter when your child is born. Yeah. Now, his answer was his only, nobody else can give the kind of answer. He's saying that what Piaggio is doing is right, and what I am doing is right in my way. It's my job to protect my business. It's a government job to bring competition. So why should I come and say, no, come and harm my business interest? Okay. Now, how many industrialists will have the courage to say that what he's doing is, in a larger economic policy sense, is wrong, but from his own business environment, business enterprise sense, is right? So Rahul Bajaj could make those distinctions so clearly, so categorically, and I don't think that today's industrialists or many other industrialists, even of his era, would actually be able to make that distinction. So he's, as you rightly said, and he's been bold, he's fiercely independent, and he had a sound business sense. I'll not cite another example of his.
I'm going to draw that from you at a later stage. Yeah, sure. But I think it's an interesting way to get this conversation going, because first and foremost, Rahul Bajaj was one of the Goliaths of Indian business. But almost in the same breath, you think of his straight talking, his boldness. And thank you for taking us back to a time when these were big deals. It wasn't easy to take on a foreign business partner. I'm changing gear a little bit. Rahul Bajaj could also be very charming and persuasive, Ambassador Mukherjee, and I think some of that came through in your opening address as well. The Mayor of Netherlands, for example, their meeting, I'm sure it was, one which set the tone for a good business relationship between India and Netherlands, but I'm jumping the gun here a little bit. Can you share an example of the Rahul Bajaj brand of charm and persuasion that often kicked in and yielded results that worked for everyone involved?
I think his charm was an inherent and intrinsic part of being Rahul Bajaj. He was born with charisma. Either you're born with charisma, you can't acquire it. His charisma was a natural. I'll give you one example. Because his charm went with his fierce patriotism and love for India. So I still remember that when the mayor of Amsterdam told him, and CB was there at that dinner, said that I think I'll take a large business delegation and go to Mumbai, where you stay, where should we stay? So I remember Rahul telling him that you must stay at the Taj. So the mayor of Amsterdam asked him, is it because it's the best hotel? So Rahul told him, no, it's because it was built by Tata so that you could have a hotel for Indians where there was no signpost outside which said, no dogs and Indians allowed inside. And the Dutch were so shocked because the Dutch have had a racist past, but I don't remember any Dutch colony having a hotel, for instance, in Indonesia with such a sign, which was a common sign. It was also there outside Delhi Gymkhana Club until we took it over. It was clearly written there, no dogs and Indians allowed inside Delhi Gymkhana Club. So when he said that, the mayor, who's a socialist and an amazing personality, said that whenever we go to Bombay, every person in Netherlands that I know, I will tell them only to stay in the Taj. Because he was like completely bowled over by what he said. And another example, as you said, of his great charm was when we did this business summit, and CB was there, and he's extremely democratic because people asked him some pretty difficult questions about the difficulty of doing business in India, about the bureaucracy, about the red tape, etc., etc. And of course, those inevitable comparisons. Why can't you people be more like the Chinese? The Chinese know how to cut through red tape, etc., etc. And then all that Rahul told them was, he said, but would you have somebody from China sitting here quietly and listening to all this and then answering? So then the audience started laughing. He said, we are democratic, so we are a little slow. Bear with us, because that's the right way to do it. And believe me, I'm not so patient. I'm being very polite and nice here because the ambassador is sitting with me on the podium. Otherwise, what I usually do with bureaucrats is I start yelling at them until they listen to what I say. So I thought to myself, yelling also is part of his charm because he always got his way, either through the charm or through the charisma or through yelling. But I wanted to conclude by saying that the first time I went to visit him in Mumbai, and he said, let's go and have lunch. So I said, okay. So I thought he would take me to some fancy 7-star, being what he was. But he took me to his factory. And I was amazed to find that there were no separate dining rooms for corporates and for the workers. Everyone sat together, and he said, have you ever had pav bhaji? So I said, what on earth is that? He said, Bengali hai na, kuch nahi pata hai. He said, you will eat pav bhaji. So I said, no, Rahul, I think it will give me an upset stomach. He said, it will not give you an upset stomach. You will eat pav bhaji and I will also eat pav bhaji. And that's what we had. That's the kind of person he was. He was just amazing. So I think that was also part of his charm.
And I think, so much of what you're hearing today, you will find in the book Hamara Rahul as well. All of the nuances in the person that Rahul Bajaj was, the many different faces and sides to him. What Ambassador Mukherjee has just described, CB, it reflects, and I'm picking up, some of the points that she made. It reflects Rahul Bajaj's confidence in India, in India's place in the world. And I urge everyone in the audience to sort of think back to what it was like in the 80s and 90s to have, these conversations with confidence and conviction. We're living in a very different context today, but in those days, to have the confidence and conviction. You've seen him demonstrate this kind of faith for decades. Is there anything that comes to mind that you can share with us?
So, we heard about his confidence, his straightforwardness in Indian businesses, and how he was a true ambassador of Indian businesses in India across the world. 1990s, when the Southeast Asian countries sort of went through a crisis, and when they came out through structures of governance which was government-led. Rahul Bajaj in CII, I remember in 1998 he started corporate governance stream of work where it was not a government imposed but how Indian corporates could actually lead the way in forming guidelines on corporate governance. Later on it became Clause 49, etc. It actually started from his work which he led on corporate governance, and it was Indian industry showing the way that even voluntary structures could be something which could be as tall, which the government could adopt in terms of making guidelines and mandatory rules and regulations. So he knew how to sort of lead when crisis was hitting another part of the world, but to show, so India's confidence in Indian industry, showing to the globe that we can also demonstrate that it needn't always be government guidelines, but corporate sector itself can have its own. So that was one, which showed confidence in Indian companies. The second was, whenever we used to, I've been once, we've been to many countries. I was once in Caribbean with him, and it was about the Commonwealth, the heads of governments meeting, and in the sidelines, of course, there was business meetings, and he was leading the delegation, business delegation. And it was about large Indian business delegation. Some of the members in that delegation were small and mid-sized companies. So I had a list, we were sitting and saying that these guys will speak. What are the names of, who are these people? I don't know much about them. So I was explaining to him that these are small and mid-sized companies. So when we were on the dais and sort of calling out, he said that let's start with them. And he talked about, he said that unless they are strong, we will not be strong. The supply chain has to be strong, Indian small business. So giving space to Indian small business where the rest of the world is participating and asking them, and he, as you said, he could be in touch with an ambassador of that level. He was in touch with these people. How are you doing in business? Is your business progressing? Are you getting adequate help from CI, or your CI is not looking after you? That type of question, which showed his phenomenal sort of commitment to make businesses grow, not just large. So that was the second one. The third, which is oft talked about, is 1991 liberalization and the Bombay Club. So all that he, and he's associated with that, right? So all that he used to really talk about, if those of many over here who knew him well, all that he went into the details was give us a level playing field. Give Indian business a level playing field, and then we can show. Don't tie us on our legs and ask us to run. And he proved that give us equality. And we like the liberalization, no issues. But it's just that you have to be as flexible with the Indian industry. Those draconian rules, regulations, which we had at that time, those needs to be sort of less stifling for us to grow and compete with the Piaggios of the world that would come in. So that was he.
I'm glad you clarified, that Bombay Club tag as well, because I think it's often sort of partially understood, or it's, seen only in a sort of one way. And I think CB's points on it were an important set. I come back to this maybe because it was just lovely to have somebody in the business world who was like Rahul Bajaj when I was a young journalist, when he was a seasoned journalist. Somebody who spoke their mind on a number of issues. Just, you could be sure that you rolled up with your mic. Mr. Bajaj, if he had a point of view, he would share it. He wouldn't hum and haw about it. And it was a well thought out point of view. You emphasize also in your contribution to Hamara Rahul that he was a straight talker, and if it had to be said, he would say it. And so I'm asking you today, AKB, to go back to that 2019 straight talking that Rahul Bajaj did, and the significance of it for those not in the know of the general approach that business tends to take in these situations.
Yeah. I'm glad you are referring to that. This is something in contrast to what he was earlier. So, in a sense, like all industrialists, like all persons, he also evolved. And I want to contrast what he did in 2019 to what he did not do in 1986 or 87. So that you know that how Rahul Bajaj evolved as an industrialist. 1986-87, Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, and he was considered close to the Prime Minister. They were good friends, apparently. And Rajiv Gandhi's government decided that they want to privatize Scooters India Limited, which had a huge expanse of land bank and everything. The company was not doing too well. And the cabinet decided to award it to Bajaj Auto. And technically, the sale was cleared. But that was a different era. There was huge protest, trade union protest. Obviously Rajiv Gandhi had rolled out a reform program of privatization without really preparing the unions or the political stakeholders there. Now, I was in a different paper those days, and I had an inkling of this, and I spoke to the Joint Secretary concerned, who later on became the chairman of Punjab and Sindh Bank. Now, I'm referring to Mr. K.S. Benz, and he told me that what you have heard is right, and cabinet has decided it. Those days joint secretaries would talk to a journalist and reveal things of this. So I came back and wrote the story, and it became the lead story of the paper and this thing, and there was a big hangama, everything. Now I was again naturally asked that find out from Rahul Bajaj that what is he doing now. Now I tried to talk to him. He was not available, not coming. So finally one of those CII meetings, not those days it was AII meetings in Taj. After the meeting, I think I spoke to Mr. Das. He says, Mr. Das, will it be okay if I catch hold of Rahul Bajaj? Mr. Das said, you are a free journalist, you can go do it. So I said, since it is an AI meeting, I need you okay on this. So I went and grabbed him, and he heard me out, and then he said, please talk to the government. He did not utter a word. Now, he understood the importance of when to keep quiet, and this too needs to be contrasted to 2019, when he spoke out. And he spoke out at a time when Indian industry leaders were talking among themselves about the need to have direct and heart-to-heart chat with the government's policy making, and even actually exchange notes on what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. And in those meetings in Bombay, in a public meeting, it was actually an award function of a media house, in which it was Rahul Bajaj who stood up and told India's Home Minister that why are you afraid of listening to industry speaking out their mind? And he actually reminded the government, 2019, that you are making a mistake. And as a matter of fact, the Home Minister replied and he said that if it is true that industry is afraid to speak out, then it's a mistake and it should not happen. And soon after that, I know meetings did take place, informal meeting, in-camera meetings with the industry leaders. It's a different matter that not too many industrialists like Rahul Bajaj were there who could speak out their mind. But the fact of the matter is this, that it was Rahul Bajaj who could speak that. I cannot think who could say it.
Yeah.
So there is, so when he wants to speak out, he will speak out. And when he doesn't want to speak out, he will not speak out. Because at that point, he felt that it is only discreet for him on his part, because he is himself involved. He should not speak out. He could have easily said that to me, that, oh, what the government is doing in Scooters India sale is completely going back on its promise. A cabinet no, he didn't do anything of that sort. He did not make a single statement. That deal did not go through finally.
I'm glad you
And,
brought
and
that
he did
example
not.
up.
So therefore, there are two facets to Rahul Bajaj, and I think we need to understand that, and that's why I am saying that he has a sound business sense. He knew when to speak out and not to speak out. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought the 86 example as well, the contrast. Another side, his deep commitment to social causes, to philanthropy, and even there, building enduring institutions. His work beyond business, broadly I could say sometimes it gets missed, just in a large understanding of what he did beyond business. You've been involved in the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation. Share some of those experiences with us, which came through in the book Hamara Rahul as well, both in your writing and in the writing of many other contributors.
Well, he asked me to join the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation, and he said, you might feel a bit lonely because everyone there is over 90. So I said, is that why you've asked me to join? He says, yes, that could be one of the reasons, he says. He had a fabulous sense of humor. So when I went there for the first time, I realized that he had put me on the jury that decides on finding a foreigner outside India with outstanding Gandhian values. And I still remember there was one candidate who I thought was outstanding. He was a Hindu working in Noakhali, which is an extremely dangerous place for a Bangladeshi Hindu to work in, right from 1946 onwards when Gandhiji went to stop the killings in Noakhali. And this man has had the courage to work there for decades and to bring Gandhian values, and the entire village, who were not Hindus, all supported him, etc. So I told Rahul, I said, in my perception, we should not think of politics. If you ask me, for this year, I told him, this Bangladeshi guy is great, and for the next year, I found him a Pakistani peacenik, whom I knew very well, and who was actually married to an Indian, the daughter of a general, General Chachi's daughter. They live in Netherlands, actually. And this Pakistani peacenik was the most amazing person I've met in my life. And they used to live in Netherlands because they had a kid. So the kid would go once a year with the father to Pakistan and once a year with the mother to India. But he actually symbolized in many ways what both countries required to move the peace process forward. And I still remember Rahul telling me, you are supposed to be the diplomat and I'm supposed to be undiplomatic. So I said, I don't know, I never said you are undiplomatic. He says, but you are bringing undiplomatic proposals to me, which are political, and then you are asking me to approve. So I said, yes. So he said, no, I don't. I think we have to be very careful. So that's when I realized that just as you said that he knew when to speak and when not to speak, he had a very carefully crafted political sense where he knew exactly what would be acceptable and what would be absolutely not acceptable. And so we settled for a really good South African that year, I remember, and the next year for somebody else. But last year, after he had passed away, we selected the Bangladeshi who came with his wife from Noakhali. And when the killings started in Bangladesh, the first thing I checked was whether he was okay. And he was okay because the village protected him. So my working in the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation made me understand the deep link between the old-fashioned corporate families and their linkages, not just to philanthropy, but to making the world understand that there is much more to life than just money. And I think he in many ways symbolized that commitment. So I'm actually very proud that he selected me to be on the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation.
Indeed. In the book, CB, you've talked about the great mentor that Rahul Bajaj was to you personally and to CII, the institution, and you have a few colleagues from your CII days here who can all attest to that. But you've said this to me that, when he undertook mentorship, it was a very special kind of mentorship because he took a lot of care, he took complete ownership of that. And to whatever extent you can be as personal as possible, share what you felt and how you gained.
So yeah, we move away from business and from diplomacy to his caring of people. I think that's a huge facet that, of course, he demonstrated. One, I would really go back again, because we referred to Davos. I remember that time there was many years back, a lady colleague within CII, very, very young, very junior, first time, probably first visit abroad or something of that kind, standing in one of the railway stations with 3 bags and suitcases and all those heavy stuff that one carries there. And he noticed, and he was amongst his friends, his Davos friends, which many of you know about. So he didn't know that this person was from CII, but he noticed an Indian lady standing with bags and not knowing what to do, went up to her and said that, and she understood that this is Rahul Bajaj speaking to me. So she was a little, no, sir, I'm all organized. He said, no, how will you carry these 2 bags? You'll have to go 3. There's an escalator, there's a lift. If you take it in an escalator, this will be the problem. But if you wait for the lift, it'll take a little while. Then you will reach the substation. But you must have another person, or let me carry your bag. He took the bag, took her down. My friends waited, saw her off into the train, came up and joined his friends. And he, of course, came to know that a lady who grew up in CII much, but she still remembers this. She narrated this story to me a few months back. Before I came to your program in Bombay. So that was one. That's the type of caring that he could, so he would break any hierarchy to help a person.
He didn't care about the label.
Absolutely. Unbelievable. The second, I must, I recollect, I was actually that time much younger and was handling a particular project within CII. And where we went into a sort of litigation and stuff like that. It was quite troublesome time, and the people on the other side were quite tough guys, tough cookies. So there were lots of threats and stuff like that. One day, and he used to call me when I used to reach, I was in another part of the country at that point in time, the western part. And he used to call me at night to say that, okay, 10 o'clock was the call on landline, to say, have you reached home, all fine? And then one day we were meeting, he said that if those guys think that they have a lot of muscle power, tell them that we are also there in CII. So we know how to take care. So, and he really went on a daily basis at that troubled period when we went through about his personal care. And the third one was as you said, to get to be personalized. So I'll give you the last one. So one day I received a call, which I was taking calls even from my unknown numbers that particular day. And it was a call, and that call said that this is, so I saw a 020 number, so I picked it up. It said it was a Sunday, and I picked it up, and it said that this is Ruby Hospital, Mr. Bajaj wants to speak to you. So I took the call, and he was almost breathless. And all that he said was, his calls used to be 45 minutes to an hour to the minimum. That day was the shortest call. And he said that, just wanted to say happy birthday. I won't be able to talk long. He was panting. And that was the last call that I had from him. So obviously he had an efficient system, but he did call me to tell me. And then of course, I never had another Sunday phone call from him. And that was his last call. And I did go across to see him in the hospital once again. But that's the way he would connect with people. It was just fabulous personalization of connects that one would do to take care and to sincerely take care, breaking all hierarchy.
I have to say, I often thought about where he got all the stamina from, because you looked around and you couldn't see people with that kind of stamina, because it takes stamina to be so invested in so many different things. I don't think many people know about the institutional work he did with IIT Mumbai, for example. and where he carved the time for each of these various roles. But you will find out if you read the book, because as I said, there are 79, 80 contributors, and all of these various things that he took ownership of are captured in the contributions in Hamara Rahul. We have about 5 minutes if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to, I would say typically ask a question, but I think it may be a tribute or a memory that you'd like to share. I can see 2 hands up. I just want to gently ask you to be brief and stay focused. So may I start with the lady first, and then I'll come to you after that. There.
So just bought the book, and I don't know if it's covered his philanthropic work, but he was associated with a large number of philanthropies, and he was also the founder member of the BCF, the Business and Community Foundation in Delhi, which was an offshoot of the International Business Leaders Forum. And through us, he also met with and supported a large number of organizations like the Aurobindo Society, the Banyan, which works with mental health, Family of the Disabled. I just had to write to him for him to, reach out and help. And I was just reading his WhatsApp messages as I came here. And, one of his many messages was about Father Stan Swami. He wrote to me saying, I'm extremely distressed by what's happening. So here was a man with a heart. Here was a man who would host our board meetings in his office, in Pune, and also a man with an explosive temper. None of you have spoken about it, but he could fly off the handle.
I will give you an instance.
He could still be a good friend and a good critic, and we had many arguments. And I like to think we still remain friends, but I still have his WhatsApp messages and the many arguments we had. My name is Amita.
Can I yes, please.
Give that instance? It's there in the book, not written by me, but somebody else. You find out who is that, He was having a meal with the author. And Rahul Bajaj, as I understood later, also he has this habit of, like many practical-minded, sensible people would, when the bill comes, he looks at the bill. And he actually looks at the bill, that how much is it and all that, everything. So this author was very puzzled. He said, hey, is this one of India's top industrialists? He's looking at the bill before he makes the payment. So he said, Rahul, what is this you are doing? So suddenly he flared up. He said, Tera baap ka paisa hai. That's all. And then he went on. I thought that part of Rahul Bajaj is actually something which needs to be treasured.
Yes.
That you don't, just because you have reached that top level, you don't think that it is necessary to count your money. It is very important. Is a mark of any individual is that don't do things which is irresponsibility. Be responsible. That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Question here. If we could have the mic here, please. It's on your right.
Ambassador Mukherjee, I think all the anecdotes and information that you shared brings about the fact that he was a true Karam yogi. And all of us who've had the privilege of meeting him, he was brutally honest, direct, and larger than life because he was honest. I mean, he was very direct. So I think the question to you is that considering he came from that era and the way he was in terms of navigating, working with the government, and really trying to make a difference for all his countrymen, if he was born and a peer of most of the industrialists today, would the same approach and the way his persona was, is that the way to be? Or do you feel, and CB, you could add on, that to work with the system, we are talking about the 2024 onwards, maybe his streak and the way of engaging would have been different?
Well, he always said that he used to argue a lot with his son, Rajiv. And I told him that his wife told me that when you have a share and a chota share, and then the chota share becomes a big share, then two big shares cannot live in the same house together because they are both shares. So when I told Rajiv this on the telephone 3 days ago, He says, but you must be joking, there was always only one sher. That was my dad, right? But he always accepted that it was his son who told him that it was time to move from scooty to motorbike. He accepted it. He said that was the right advice that Rajiv gave, that we must now move. The time in India for that little Bajaj auto with the whole family, husband, wife, one little kid in front, two kids at the back squeezed in between the parents, which was a big thing in those days, for somebody to have conveyance. He said, now we have moved to the motorbike. And he was absolutely right, because the motorbike, in Delhi at least, actually runs the economy. Without a bike, Delhi's economy will just come to a standstill. And so therefore I would say that if a man can take the advice of the Chota Sher, who's listening to us, by the way, so I'm sure he's going to kill me when I reach home. He took the advice of the Chota Sher, and he said Chota Sher is right in telling the big Sher that, Dad, it's time to move. Then I'm sure if he had been around, he would 100% have accepted. He also always listened to advice given by his wife. She didn't give it very often, but she did. She was the daughter of an ICS officer. And I still remember that I had gone to Bombay because she was not well, and they were going to fly her out for the last surgery that she needed to do. He came back from the hospital and we were all having dinner, and Rajiv was also there. And he just said a simple thing. He said, she is one person whose advice I always listen to. And that's why I am not ready to let her go. So I held his hand and I said, why should you let her go? He says, because for the first time in my life, I'm afraid. And she didn't come back from that journey. When they took her, this was the second heart surgery. She didn't come out of it. So I do think, I am convinced, that if he had been there, he would have adapted to new methods, because he was extremely democratic and he did listen to advice given to him. The important thing is, he had to respect his interlocutor. If he didn't respect his interlocutor, he wouldn't take the advice. CB? You agree?
No, yeah, absolutely. Nothing to add on to that, but I think whether he would have been in the 80s or whether he would have been in 2020s, he would have been the same man, because even in whichever decade I had seen him, and all the decades, he was just the same. And he would have been so because I think he was very thorough. I mean, not just only looking at the bill, which is very important, but if any representation would go to him, which we would go to the policymaker with, he would challenge, he will read each line, he will make changes, he will say, why is this? So when he would argue or put up a case, he was on the top of it. So if he was on the top of it, he could say then and now in the same way that he did.
Well said. I think we have time for one more question. I'm not sure we'll be able to take it beyond that. You've been waiting, so question or memory?
Sure. Lovely. Well, my question is for all of the panelists. I ask this both from the perspective of someone who's curious, but also my grandfather had led the CII for 2 terms, Manmohan Singh, one of which was with Mr. Bajaj. And so my question really is, all of you have described Mr. Bajaj's human touch and the access that he gave the people around him. And it was described sort of as a quality that's a dying breed. I'm curious, at the time that Mr. Bajaj had that huge influence with the people around him and at the CII, so to Mr. Banerjee as well, do you think that was contagious, or do you think that was something that was isolated with Mr. Bajaj?
Very tough question you've given, CB, huh?
I'm sure we can have it.
No, actually, the way he would lead, I mean, the way one saw his leadership, it was leadership with values, this was leadership with determination, in the sense of he believed in what he was leading. He would never do something which he never believed in. I have seen him very balanced, I mean, while he was fiercely CII, as we all know.
Yes.
He was even jokingly and lovingly called the owner of CII. But there were many global institutions with which he connected CII, World Economic Forum being one, and there were many other not as big. but he connected CII internationally and nationally to many institutions, many NGOs and others. And when he double-hatted, it was amazing to see that he was so balanced. It was never ever taking the side of any one of them. So if there was issues, always there could be an issue between two partners, and he was, whenever there was issue, he led, and he led for both, and he did bring a solution to it. So he was very deep and very committed, and therefore I don't see, and because of his non-partisan, you know, it was contagious to sort of follow the principles that he always laid down for institutions. He was an institution builder.
Well, I'm sorry, I know there were some other people who would have liked to share and ask, but we literally have 2 minutes left, and it's been lovely having this conversation. I'm going to put the same question to each one of you. Quite simply, what will you remember Rahul Bajaj most for?
You're asking me now?
Yes.
I think I will remember for his forthrightness. I think he was an absolutely forthright person, and whether you know, I think CB talked about, and I think there was a reference to his family, and I think he was so open about his differences, real or imaginary. He would talk about them in a public forum. I remember we Business Standard gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. In the award receiving ceremony, his entire family was there present, including Mr. Rahul Bajaj, and he said that, you know, I've got differences with my son. So he was an open book. So, and he didn't mind. So his forthrightness, I would say that probably he is. And in many ways, I will say that was also a quality which probably marked people of that era also. I don't know whether we still have those leaders who are as forthright as his generation people.
Well, I hope we can rejuvenate some of that sentiment by talking about it today and reading the book. Ambassador Mukherjee, what will you remember him most for and best for?
I'm going to narrate a very personal experience which I've never narrated before. You know, in civil service, they turf you out when you're 60. You may think you're on top of the world one day, and then the next day you are a nobody. That happened to all of us, including me, and I came back. And I called him up, and he said, "Oh, so now you're back?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "And you're finding time hanging heavy on your hands?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you miserable?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, don't be." I said, "Why not?" He says, "Now you are free to do what you can do. So now you reinvent yourself. You become an author, you become a personality, you get onto television, you do all the things that you could not do when you were in government." So I told him, "That's because you're saying that because you're Rahul Bajaj." He says, "I'm saying that because you're Bhaswati Mukherjee. I wouldn't tell you that unless I thought you were capable of doing it." And when I wrote the first book and I sent it to him, he called me. He said, "It's very good for a first book. Write the second one now." So I have to say, this was the man who did so much for me, and without telling anybody, one day he called me and he said, "Your baggage." I said, "Yes." He said, "Didn't you tell me that it's going to be coming next week?" I said, "Yes." He said, "But didn't you say you're renovating your place?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where are you going to store it?" I said, "I haven't yet figured out." He said, "I have an empty guest house. I'm telling the guy to get in touch with you. Just keep everything there." And I kept all my heavy baggage, 320 cartons, in that guest house for 1.5 years. And nobody knows about it till today. So that's the kind of person that Rahul Bajaj was. My Rahul Bajaj, that I can never forget.
CB, what will you remember him for most of all?
Well, I agree with all. Of course, his fearlessness, his commitment, his dedication, and detailed what we talked about. And then I just comment on one more, is caring. I think he was really caring. I still remember, he used to call me, I mentioned a little while back, on Sundays, no agenda calls, no nothing. How are you, what's happening in CII, who's doing what's happening there. So no agenda calls, 45 minutes, 1 hour. And the calls used to come at 3 p.m., always on landline. And it was never mobile to mobile, but it was always landline to landline. And it used to come in the afternoon, 3 p.m. And someone at home used to would have to pick it up. Saab so raha hai, kya so raha hai to, I mean, if he's sleeping, don't wake him up. No, he's not sleeping, he's there, he's not taking a Sunday afternoon nap. So the call would continue. One day the call didn't come one Sunday, and it came at 7 p.m. I was not at home. So he's talking to the person at home, and he's overawed. He knew Rahul Bajaj. Rahul Bajaj used to have long conversation with my help at home, and long conversations. So, "Saab kahan gaya hai? Official mein gaya hai, personal gaya hai?" So the poor guy says, "I don't know." So he says, "Okay, personal gaya hai to madam ko le jana chahiye tha, और official है तो नहीं जाना चाहिए था, Sunday को refuse करना था." Now who's telling me the story at 9:30 when I'm coming back home? My domestic, my Bajaj साहब ने ये बोला मेरे को. So अच्छा मैडम को ले गया तो ठीक है. So must be. So he was so detailed and so caring, unbelievable.
Well, we're going to leave it at that. But Ambassador Mukherjee, A.K. Bhattacharya, Chandrajit, Banerjee, thank you so much, for making the time to be here. I think it's important that we celebrate people like Rahul Bajaj, and the book Hamara Rahul is a celebration. There are copies available for sale here, I believe. You can also order them online for those of the younger generation who like to go down that route. But I'd like to thank the India Habitat Center and Ambassador Mukherjee for hosting us this evening and for arranging the virtual attendance as well. We've had people joining us online. And to everyone in the audience, thank you. Well, I'm Bihari.